Hi, Lana and Louise. Good to meet you.
Hi,
Um,
Tim.
Hi,
Hi there.
Tim.
I understand you're up and running with Workflow Plus, and you're just trying to look at data and integrations, and kind of getting your data out of Workflow Plus and doing useful things with it. Can you explain a bit more about what you're using Workflow Plus for, and what your use case is, and what you're hoping to achieve?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So we started to use Workflow Plus to carry out site inspections specifically. Um, so the results of which we would need to export to, in the first instance, an Excel spreadsheet. Um, the inspections that we carry out are pump valve type inspections, equipment inspections, and they're carried out once a week per task, per job, by individuals. Currently, it's done on a paper-based process, and we want to digitize that. So when we say we need to send the results or export the results to an Excel spreadsheet, which we're manually updating at the moment, we would need to see information such as job name, certain results or inputs once the inspection's been completed, such as repairs and things that needs to take place downstream. So any images or videos or damaged valves or equipment, to prompt that activity to our repair team. Generally speaking, if an inspection goes well and everything's fine, we will just need to see it on the Excel spreadsheet. But if there are things and remedial activities that need to take place or repairs, then we would need an integration, an automated integration, to be able to fire an email
Yeah.
of the report or with an activity, a single step. We basically want to automate as much of the process as possible and remove human interaction from inputting, so avoiding human error.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to do in the first instance. It may also be that further down the line, we want to integrate this with our in-house SharePoint. So it'd be good to know what the options are around that. It's not something that we're thinking of doing straight away, but I understand it's something we can do further down the line with Workflow Plus if we wanted to explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. That's really helpful. So I could talk a bit about Workflow Plus in general, and how we see it working and integrating into other systems, and then maybe we can circle back to your use case specifically from there. So I've just got a presentation that I can go through, and we can pick out some relevant bits. So if I just
That'd be great. Thanks, Tim.
share this. Lovely. So, you know, what you're describing is similar actually to a lot of our customers. It's quite rare that people want to use Workflow Plus entirely in isolation, and so often you want it to be feeding into wider business processes, and to be automated kind of downstream actions, or to be flowing into data stores, whatever type of data store they may be. So some of the common use cases that we see are things like wanting to send an email report to a repairs team when an inspection flags an issue, which I think you described
Yes.
something similar to that. Storing your captured images and videos um, in a file share like Dropbox or OneDrive or SharePoint. Writing a row of data to a spreadsheet, writing maybe a message to something like Teams or Slack, updating a customer CRM, or maybe even sending an SMS or an email. So lots of different things that people might want to do off the back of Workflow Plus, and the way that we kind of see that working, and our customers have enabled these sorts of things, is to use what we call an integration tool or an automation tool, and basically if you think you've got Workflow Plus, which is initiating and capturing and then making the data available. And then you've got your other applications. So you mentioned Excel and Google Sheets and SharePoint. And then in order to get the data from one to the other, you need something that sits in the middle. And that can be can take different forms, and it can be using different tools, but essentially its job is to either kind of receive the data from Workflow Plus, or to ask Workflow Plus for the data, and then to kind of select the right bits of data to transform it, and then to direct it into the right place. And so, uh, yeah, and then this is the most kind of common way that people, enable integration between different tools, different cloud-based tools. And it also, if you think, often people will ask us about, can you directly integrate with, another given application? And given the number of tools that people want to work with, actually having direct integrations is relatively rare, unless two tools are kind of made by the same company, or they work together as part of a wider stack. So this is the kind of common way to approach it. And the nice thing about having something in the middle, we call an integration layer or some middleware, is you can also put your business logic in there. So if you want to do specific things, or you have specific rules, this is your kind of place to put those rules. So those integration tools, I mean, there are loads, and different tools work better for different use cases, and some are more at the kind of low code end, and some are more code and developer type tools, and some are at enterprise level, and some are kind of designed for people to just pick up and run with. We tend to use Zapier and Power Automate. We tend to use Zapier for integrating with most tools, and then Power Automate to integrate with anything that's Microsoft, because it's a Microsoft tool, formerly called Microsoft Flow. So, but yeah, there are many others, and the point here is that we may use Zapier or Power Automate when we're working with customers, but any of these tools should work with Workflow Plus. We've made features to enable any of these tools to work Plus. So we're agnostic really as to what you want to use.
That's really great, Tim. Just out of interest, if we were to go down this route of using a tool in the middle, such as something like Zapier or Power Automate, is that something that we would need to manage ourselves in terms of, would we have to have a license for that as a third party, or how would that work?
So you wouldn't have to, in terms of your Workflow Plus licenses, you wouldn't need any additional licenses, or special licenses. You'd need licenses for the people who were going to be developing and kind of testing these integrations, so they could use Workflow Plus. And then Zapier and Power Automate kind of have their own licensing model. They have free tiers and then paid for tiers, which enable more connectors and higher usage and that sort of thing. So yeah, so but yeah, it would ultimately be down to yourselves to kind of set up Zapier or Power Automate. We could help you do that, but it would be yours to manage.
Great, that's great.
Yeah, so we mentioned Zapier and Power Automate. Currently, the approach that we tend to use for integrating with these is to use kind of generic connectors in Workflow Plus. So yeah, and there's two kind of ways that we get data out of Workflow Plus, and I sort of crudely call them a kind of a push or a pull approach. So you can either set up a trigger or HTTP trigger. That's an instruction to Workflow Plus that whenever a job's completed, it should send data, and we tell it where to send it. And that's often a reference to a Power Automate flow or a Zapier Zap. And so every time a job completes, then the data will run through and it will be directed to the right place. Or we can set up a scheduled kind of web request within our Power Automate flow, or a Zap, or other approach, and that can then run a query to Workflow Plus, a GraphQL query using our query feature, and that will then get the latest data for again whichever workflows or jobs you're interested in. Um, and so, either approach is valid. I would tend to say querying is the right way to go for building up a data set. Um, triggers is the right way to go if you need to initiate some immediate downstream action. So, if say your use case was, well, this email needs to go as soon as this issue is flagged, then triggers is the right solution for that because it's immediate. If
And
you
yeah, we would definitely need that for, say, for instance, if there's urgent remedial work that needs to take place. So that's definitely something we want to do.
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
But then if you're looking to build up a data set somewhere, then queries is probably the more appropriate way to go. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The nice thing about queries is you can actually, rather than getting all of the data, you can specify which data you're interested in. So it's kind of, you end up with a smaller amount of information to kind of work with and manipulate. And if later on you decide that you want to change something about your data store, whether that's a database or an online spreadsheet, you want to change the definition of some columns, or you want to add additional data that you weren't getting before, with a query you can just change the query, or rerun that whole data extraction and writing into your data store. But with a trigger, that's a kind of a one-time event that gets created, and you can manually re-trigger these events, but you wouldn't want to do that across all of your historical data. And so, yeah, for that reason, I think the query is the right way to go for that use case.
So we could use queries then to build up the data set and then perhaps run monthly reports and quarterly reports using that.
Yeah.
That would be a better way to do it. Fine, thank you.
And so this is just a sort of a diagram showing an example automation. So in this scenario, we're taking images, videos, files, maybe even that have been captured during our jobs in Workflow Plus. We want them to end up in SharePoint. And so in Workflow Plus, we've got a trigger set up, and it's configured to run for a specific workflow, and it's kind of pointed at a Power Automate flow. And that Power Automate flow is in turn set up to receive that data, to look through all of the steps and all of the attachments wherever they've been captured on a given step, and to actually download each of those attachments in turn, and then to load it into a folder rather in SharePoint. And so this will run kind of every time job completes. The attachments will make their way through to that folder. So that's just an example of the sorts of automation that you can achieve. This is an example use case. It's probably more interesting actually to circle back to your use case. Actually, if you can just kind of remind me of what you were looking to achieve.
So in the first instance, we're looking to send completed jobs to an email on a completed job to specified users or groups.
Yeah.
We would like to have the option of being able to take out certain steps to, as you explained, to trigger downstream actions like emergency remedial works or repairs. And then we would like to build up a database, as Louise said, when exporting to either Excel or Google. We use both. So, and then further down the line, integrate with SharePoint. So getting all of the images from jobs completed out. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so I think for the email use case, yeah, something like Zapier, you could set it up to receive or job data from Workflow Plus, and then you can, once the data's into Zapier, you've got the doors kind of open to connecting into many different tools, and there's loads of kind of pre-configured options in there, and one of those is to either use the Zapier client to send an email, or you can connect it to an account like a MailChimp or a SendGrid account, if you've got one of those. So that sort of thing, absolutely, you can do that using. And actually, if your requirement is simply to just send emails for every job, then you can do that within Workflow Plus using an email trigger. If you want to have some rules in place around only send the email, given these conditions, that's when you go into somewhere like Zapier, and then you can set up those rules in Zapier to kind of filter out the jobs that don't really need to be sent on to people. And also, going into somewhere like Zapier gives you the ability to kind of pick out that step data and put it into the email body, and then it may maybe even take out some attachments and attach those to the email as well if people need access to the videos, and maybe they're not a Workflow Plus user themselves. And then in terms of the data store, it's actually really easy to kind of query Workflow Plus directly from a tool like Excel or Google Sheets or Power BI. You can go into the queries editor and generate a query in here. And there's documentation online in our developer docs, which outlines everything you will need to know about writing a query using the query API. And I won't go into the detail now, but you can choose how you're going to filter on your jobs. Is it specific workflows that you want, or is it a period of time, or do you want data for a particular user or users? And then once you've decided which jobs you want, you can decide what data you're interested in. So that could be step values, it could be durations, it could be geolocation, it could be user identity, all sorts of information, and you can configure that as you need to generate your query. So you can go into the Query Designer here and set up your query. Once you're happy with it, it's just a case of actually exporting it as a URL, and then you can paste that directly into something like Excel or Power BI. And we've actually got an example here again in the documentation that shows how to do that. So it takes you through the process of writing your query, checking that the output's okay, copying the URL out, and then pasting it into Excel, and then Excel will kind of query the data. So that's a really great way to kind of get familiar with getting the data out. The limitation there, though, is that you can only pull out something in the order of 50 or 100 jobs in a single query. And so if your Excel spreadsheet just needs to have in it the most recent data, and that's going to be less than 100 jobs, then that's fine. You can create that direct link. But if you want to build up a set of data over time and add to it and add to it and add to it, then you'll need to do something slightly more involved. And again, you can achieve that with something like Zapier or Power Automate, or you can use more of a sort of a data ETL tool, and that would just involve running the query each day or each hour, or however often you need to run it, and you can provide it a reference each time to the last time that you ran the query to tell it, okay, well, I've got data up to this point, I just need any new data, and then Workflow Plus will just give you any new jobs, and you can add them into your Excel spreadsheet or into your database, or wherever you're keeping the data.
Okay,
That
that's
sounds
great.
perfect,
Yeah. I suppose you want to avoid making your data set really big, and doing it this way in terms of the last X number of jobs maintains that, which is a good thing for us.
Yeah, it depends what you're wanting, really. If you're looking to aggregate data over a long period of time, and you need lots and lots of jobs, then yeah, you can set up something that's capturing your data day by day, adding to it, adding to it. If all you need is a view of what's going on today or what's going on, on a particular project, you might be able to fit that data into a single kind of query, and therefore you can just make a direct link into Workflow Plus to get that data out.
Yeah, that's great.
Very incisive. Thank you, Tim.
Pleasure. Are there any other questions, or any areas that we haven't touched on?
I think this gives us what we need in the first instance, to go away and have a play with it and see what would be the best solution for us, whether it would be that we write the queries in Workflow Plus and export into Excel that way, or whether we go through the Zapier route to really kind of hone in on the data that we're pulling out. So perhaps not all of the job information, but perhaps just the actions whereby there is a remedial work that needs to take place, or repairs. So we'll go away and have a play around with that, and see what options we feel are best. I guess the only other thing to cover really loosely is what would be our options if further on down the line we decided to integrate with SharePoint. Do we follow the same type of process, or is that a more complex solution?
So we've worked on a few different integrations to SharePoint, for different customers. And one approach that we've taken is to use Power Automate. And so you can integrate with SharePoint quite nicely using Power Automate, because it's all under a single Microsoft login. Actually, it's once you've kind of given it your Microsoft credentials, then you can access your SharePoint drives and folders from there quite straightforward.
Cool. And that's through using HTTP in Workflow Plus in the integration section, right?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, actually, you could do it either way. If you wanted to get your data into SharePoint, you could set up a Power Automate to receive the data from a trigger, or you could set it up to actually periodically query Workflow Plus. Either way will be possible in Power Automate. But then sometimes things might be a bit more complicated, and we've actually written sort of bespoke bits of code for people and deployed those as web apps for more involved integrations to SharePoint, because at a certain point a low-code tool like Power Automate might not it might be sort of more efficient to use a kind of code-based tool.
Okay, that's really great. I mean, that's all the questions from me. This has been really useful, and given us plenty of food for thought as to the best solution to get our data out there. And there seems to be lots of options available to us. Do you have any more questions, Louise?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much covered everything that we wanted to go through today. So thanks very much, Tim.
Great, it's been a pleasure. And yeah, do let us know kind of what your next thoughts are, and how we can help you out in any other way.
Brilliant, thank you.
Will do. Thanks, Tim.
Bye.
Bye-bye.